Welcome to the fifth episode of our show, Pakistan, a hard country where we delve into the complex realities of Pakistan through the lens of Anatol Lieven's thought-provoking book.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into Chapter 4, Religion, specifically pages 104 to 135.
That's right, you sent us this chapter wanting to understand the powerful and, well, really multifaceted role of religion in Pakistani society.
And that's exactly what we aim to unpack. We're looking at theological disagreements, the limits to radicalism.
The influence of saintly politicians, shrines, superstition.
Yeah, and also the different strands, Puritans, Fundamentalists, Reformists like the Jamaat-e-Islami, and militant groups, too.
So basically distilling Lieven's key insights on these religious expressions and their impact. Let's get started.
Okay, so first up, this idea of feuding theologians. What's fascinating right off the bat is Lieven's point that pretty much all Sunni Islamist groups in Pakistan,
From Jamaat-e-Islami to the Taliban.
right, they draw from two main traditions, Deobandi and Al-Hadith.
Okay, Deoband.
Yep.
That goes back to a madrasa in Deoband, India, 1866.
Exactly, and has really inspired a lot of political Islamism in Pakistan. Al-Hadith, well, that literally means people of the Hadiths, focuses directly on the Prophet's sayings.
And Lieven traces these back further, doesn't he, to Shah Waliullah?
He does. His teachings influenced the Deobandis, but maybe more directly, Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi back in the early 19th century.
Barelvi. He's the one who attempted that jihad against the Sikhs in Punjab.
That's the one. And here's where it gets quite interesting for later events. Barelvi and his followers moved to the Pathan tribal areas.
Why there?
Well, Lieven points out two things. No real government control, so it was a kind of safe haven, and the perception that the Pathan tribes were, strong fighters.
It really does foreshadow later figures like bin Laden using those same areas, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That pattern of seeking ungoverned spaces for religiously motivated action, it starts early.
Okay, so we have these traditions, this history, but then Lieven talks about the limits to radicalism. He argues they can't just easily overthrow the state.
Yeah, he suggests there are inherent religious and societal barriers, unless, of course, the state gets severely weakened by outside pressure.
So it's not necessarily a nation constantly on the brink. What are these barriers then?
Well, several things. One, he notes that religious parties in Pakistan don't really have the backing of the modern educated business and technical types.
Not like the Justice Party in Turkey, for instance.
Right. So that limits their ability to come up with, workable solutions for today's social and economic problems.
Makes sense.
And maybe even more importantly, groups like the Jamaat, they directly challenge the really entrenched power structures.
You mean property, patronage, kinship, that whole system?
Exactly. The stuff that really dominates Pakistani politics. And that includes their opposition to
The peers,
Yeah.
hereditary descendants of saints.
Yes. These figures hold massive influence, especially out in the countryside, and often within the regimes themselves. Challenging them is challenging a core part of the power base.
Which brings us nicely to saintly politicians. Lieven stresses the historical role of Sufi saints, right, in actually bringing Islam to South Asia.
He really does. He talks about how they often found common ground, integrated into communities, help people understand faith, connect with the supernatural.
So a more organic spread of religion?
Very much so.
Yeah.
But then you get the hereditary issue. The peers inherit their influence.
And that clashes with modern ideas of progress and democracy.
Yeah, it's the tension Lieven highlights. Their power comes from tradition, from deference, not necessarily modern political legitimacy.
He gives the example of Pir Pagaro in Sindh, supporting the PPP.
Yeah, a classic example of that inherited political clout. Yeah. Lieven calls it a tragic tension. The traditions that maybe prevent an Islamist revolution also hinder broader development.
A real catch-22.
Definitely.
And tied into this are the shrines and superstitions. Lieven notes that radical secular reformers often hated these places.
And absolutely. Think of Ataturk in Turkey. He cracked down hard on shrines and Sufi orders.
Why? Because they saw it as superstition or...
That, and also because loyalty to a peer could sometimes transcend loyalty to the nation state. It created competing power centers.
Even the British, Lieven says, sometimes preferred the more text-based urban Islamists over local customs.
It's true. Lieven then gives that vivid description of the shrine at Sewan Sharif in Sindh.
The one with both Islamic and Hindu legends.
That's it. The drumming, the dancing, women participating, some in trance-like states. It's a powerful picture of, well, syncretic belief. A real blend.
It shows how deeply embedded these practices are, and politicians know it, right? Bhutto donating golden gates.
You have to pay respects.
Yeah.
It shows the enduring political weight of these figures and places.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to Puritans, Fundamentalists, Reformists, focusing on the Jamaat-e-Islami. Lieven includes a personal story here.
Yeah, visiting young Jamaat activists in Lahore in 2009. He contrasts it with a visit 20 years earlier.
What was the difference? What struck him?
He found these young men were from educated but lower middle-class backgrounds. Polite, hospitable, but you could sense the underlying fanaticism kept sort of veiled.
Okay.
But what really hit him was understanding their family's struggle, this intense effort to just avoid slipping into the criminal underclass.
And the Jamaat provided something.
Discipline, a moral framework, a support system. They talked about the pool of street crime, drugs. The red light district wasn't far. Religion, specifically the Jamaat, was helping them resist that.
That really humanizes it, doesn't it? It's not just ideology, it's social reality.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
again, he notes the Jamaat challenges those existing power structures we talked about.
Right. Finally, the chapter touches on militants, and Lieven pushes back against a common idea in the West.
Yeah, the idea that the explosion of madrasas during the Afghan war is the main driver of militancy in Pakistan.
He says that's too simple.
He argues it is. He points out that actually a majority of known Pakistani terrorists went to government schools. Many even have higher education.
So it's not just the poorest attending madrasas.
It seems the base for Islamism, including the militant kind, is often more urban, lower middle class. People with some education but maybe frustrated opportunities.
Interesting. Though he does acknowledge many Taliban fighters did attend madrasas.
Oh, for sure. But the link between government schooling, higher education even, and militancy is, well, it's significant. It complicates the narrative.
It certainly suggests radicalization isn't only about religious seminaries. There are other factors, social, economic frustrations, perhaps.
Precisely. And it sets the scene for talking more about the Taliban later in the book.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into Lieven's religion chapter, it really shows a complex tapestry, doesn't it?
Absolutely. From the theological roots and the limits on extremism to the enduring power of saints and shrines, and then the different faces of Islamist movements.
It definitely challenges any simplistic view of religion's role in Pakistan. Lots of nuances, contradictions even.
So, reflecting on all this, what really stands out to you about how religion and power weave together in Pakistan, based on Lieven's take?
It makes you think differently about the country's challenges, but also its resilience, perhaps, how these deep traditions both anchor and potentially constrain it.
It's a thread that clearly runs right through Pakistan's story. Definitely worth keeping in mind as we continue exploring the book.